Hey everybody, welcome to Monday. Yeah, my face looks weird because I was shooting boss fight stuff, but that's not what this video is about today. This video is going to be heavy and kind of personal, and if you want to skip it, I understand. But remember all the times I've told you guys, I'll tell you when I'm not okay. Stop assuming I'm not okay unless I tell you I'm okay. Well, I'm not okay right now. As far as I'm concerned, there was a huge line crossed in gaming over the weekend where Kotaku just threw down a political gauntlet and produced unprecedented coverage, really tangentially connected to video games. They found a few video game developers with an opinion on a thing that has nothing to do with video games. And even in the incredibly skewed prism of video game journalism was just so far over the line. I consider it to not only be a breach of ethics, but something that I cannot read, I cannot think about without being angry. If you appreciate this sort of coverage, where I sort of bare my soul to make a point and get friggin' attacked on the internet just for telling the damn truth, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Because I will get attacked. I will get attacked because this is about the friggin' Middle East. And the last thing I want to talk about is the friggin' Middle East. So I'm not going to talk about the Middle East. People have the right to have any opinion they want on the Middle East. But let's face it, we're not talking about Egypt. No, we're not talking about Lebanon or Libya or Jordan, or any of those places. No, people use the Middle East as a euphemism for Israel and Palestine. Or I prefer to say the West Bank and the Gaza Strip because Palestine is a Roman term. It's a term of occupation, which I do not understand why the people who claim to be railing against the occupiers use a name of a place created by occupiers. I don't get it. I don't have to. That's not the point. Politics of this sort belong nowhere on a gaming site. And previous to this was not on gaming sites. So I don't care what your opinions are on this issue. I really don't. And I'm not going to offer mine because you know what? This is a gaming channel and it doesn't fucking matter. If you're interested in my opinions on politics, that's what my Twitter account is for. I don't do this here for a reason, because people come here to see my opinions on video games and, things going on connected to video games. And that's what this video is about. The coverage of something on a video game site compared to other coverage of other things on video game sites. It is a compare and contrast video. Anybody that says that I'm getting political here, that is in bad faith, because I am not. This is friggin' stay in your goddamn lane, beat journalism 101. Cooking columnists should not be commenting on the crime column, right? The person who does the agony aunt column isn't suddenly going to do a column on politics without expecting to catch a ton of criticism. That's where we are. And so I want to show you previous coverage Kotaku did first of contentious areas in the world, because let's set a baseline, right? I'm being fair. Before I went, this is bullshit, Kotaku, I looked up their coverage of other things. So I looked up the coverage that Kotaku did on Hong Kong. Okay, which of course is the subject to the British handed Hong Kong back to the Chinese and, shit hit the fan. I'm going to leave it there because this isn't about politics. So we have Hong Kong protests are growing outside of BlizzCon. Okay, direct connection to gaming, connection to BlizzCon, right? Fair game. Hong Kong protests come to Animal Crossing. Again, fair game. It's Animal Crossing, right? Chinese Overwatch team threatened boycott. That Chinese Overwatch team, threatened boycott of Korean player for statements on Taiwan and Hong Kong. All right, that's gaming, right? Inbounds. Okay, I searched Taiwan as well because for people who may not know, Taiwan's in trouble too. The Communist Party of China, which I treat as separate than the Chinese people. Friends of mine made the case that makes sense, and I realized that makes sense for all countries, right? The governments are not their people. People, the majority of people, can oppose the actions of a government, and there's nothing they can do about it if the government is authoritarian enough, right? So, Taiwan. Controversial Taiwanese horror game Devotion is back and available for sale. And you know what? This is really great. Because you know what? The best thing you can do for people in these places that are under threat is to take relevant stuff to the focus of your website and promote it so they can get some capital flowing in. Okay? Then I expanded beyond China and started looking up, because, China is easy, right? There's a lot of game dev in China. There's a lot of game dev in Hong Kong. There's even a lot of game dev in Taiwan. The whole Asian world, pretty big for games, right? Not so much. Yeah, I mean, Israel's a tech hub, but there's not a lot of game dev going on in Gaza Strip, right? Maybe West Bank, but there's not a lot of game dev going on in Gaza, right? So I wanted to do something comparable. So I looked up Kotaku's coverage of the Tigray region. I hope I'm pronouncing that, Tigray region in Ethiopia. A lot of people have not heard of this conflict. Exactly. This is something I found out because I read The Economist. I'm a subscriber to The Economist. It's awesome for world events. Short version, again, not putting my political spin on it, is that there's a war in a part of Ethiopia. It's look it up if you're interested. But the short version is there's a humanitarian catastrophe. There is so little reporting from this part of Ethiopia that no one's quite sure how many casualties there have been here. It could be as few as a couple hundred people. It could be as many as 100,000. That's how little we know. What we do know is that 1.7 million people were displaced across this region at the end of March. 4.5 million people are in need of emergency aid, according to the United Nations. 4.5 million people is about double the population of the Gaza Strip, in case anybody is interested in the toll of the human suffering. This will come in relevant with the charity solicits that various websites are doing. If you want to do the most good for the most innocent people, the UNHCR is doing a fundraiser for the refugees who have fled Ethiopia. Now, the thing about this is that this is to support the 62,000 refugees that have arrived in Sudan, excuse me. So the money can actually get to them. Hold that thought. That's important, okay? But if you want to, because we're going to move into the coverage now, after one more thing, one more example, just as a baseline of how Kotaku covered other things, because this is what I got when I Googled Kotaku Tigray. She was harassed by a games reporter. Now she's speaking out. So they have done nothing. Kotaku has done nothing on the largest humanitarian crisis by scale going on right now because of a 6-month shadow war. Like, again, these numbers, 6 months, okay? It's not over years and years and years. 6 months. That's it. This many people displaced. It's a real problem, okay? I also, just to keep myself honest, looked up Kotaku's coverage of Crimea and got Crimea Attorney General spawns anime fan art. Okay? So we see how Kotaku normally handles this stuff. And now we shift to Palestine. And an absolutely shameless, okay, this is kind of funny. They are forcing ads to stay at the top of the screen for the Palestinian article. And it's something for underwear. Of course, you could not do this in the Gaza Strip, okay? You can't run an article like that, right? Because it's controlled by Hamas. So the internet gods enjoy irony, but here's the, as Palestine suffers, a call for action. So no connection to a convention, no connection to a game, no connection to an esports player. Again, no connection to a gaming controversy, even harassment or fan art. Just boom, we're gonna run a political article on a fucking game site. And it isn't even-handed. It isn't focused on the Palestinian people. It refers to apartheid conditions by the fascist Israeli government, borderline genocidal treatment of the Palestinian people, so on and so forth. I'm not going to read the whole thing because this is propaganda. This is not even-handed reporting, okay? There's one half paragraph on two game devs. Sorry, one game developer and one managing editor of Gamespot issued calls to actions as individuals. And I want to be really clear, okay? Game devs who feel strongly about these things have every right to voice their opinions of it and take what consequences they may. That's their right of free speech, okay? They also have the right to make any game they want on this controversy from whatever perspective they want, the same way I supported the right for the makers of 6 Days in Fallujah to make a game about, the Second Battle of Fallujah from the perspective of the American soldiers. If someone wants to make a game about Gaza, that's amazing, okay? That's what I think would be appropriate for a game site to cover. Not a heavy political thing, calling for BDS, which is the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement against Israel, which isn't really working, but they keep going on. A whole bunch of other things that have nothing to do with video games. And then PS charities, okay? Now, the reason I'm focusing on Kotaku is because they just lost the plot. There is no attempt at objectivity. There is no attempt to stay in their lane in terms of, this is a video game site. If they wanted to do an article on the two guys that spoke out, Rami Ismail, if they want to do a thing on his comments, great. They've embedded Timur Hussein's video, but this article isn't about Timur Hussein's video. I would have been fine with that because that's actually the managing editor of GameSpot and what he said. It's not taking a side in the conflict. This is a guy by the name of Ian Walker grandstanding on fucking Palestine. Like, the level of just who let this happen is off the charts. There were ways to sneak it in and still maintain their mandate. They didn't choose to. And it got so shameless that there's still dead links to IGN. This is a particular, you've lost your objectivity when. IGN collected a variety of Palestinian charities in need of donations and even gave a Palestinian flag prominence in its masthead, prompting a bullshit condemnation from its Israeli offshoot. What does that actually mean? It means when you click the link, see how it's, error 404. It's not found because the link, because IGN realized, wait a minute, we're a game site. What are we doing? And the underwear ad was there again. I don't know if you noticed. But now, okay, if game sites suddenly want to do fundraising for humanitarian crises, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. If it's just, I think it's good to care about people displaced by war. This particular conflict is a bit of a problem because there's some questions about whether the money actually gets to the civilians caught in the crossfire here, right? That's an issue. That's why I said when I talked about Tigray, that no, it is in a relatively safe UN-controlled area. The money will actually get where you sent because, there's Gaza is a black hole when it comes to charities. The money could very well be getting where it needs to go. The point is nobody really knows because even World Vision, it's all cash transactions and nobody knows where the money goes. And I think that's really important when a website is advocating for charity. But the thing I will give GameSpot, even though they stepped out of their lane, they kept the focus on the civilians that were suffering. Fine. Off topic, but fine. You're not getting political. Like, as you may have seen in the news, Palestinian civilians are currently being subjected to great suffering. Fact. Significant numbers have been injured or killed in the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem after being bombarded by Israeli forces. Okay, they're not bombing Jerusalem. Okay, there were skirmishes in the streets and some police overreaction sort of thing. Police got too rough. I'll give them that. Fine. But still bordering on fact. Areas are now without electricity and water, making the lives of the already hopeless and wounded people much more difficult. Fact. Okay? Recent events compound decades worth of damage and destruction that has left the people in the areas affected in dire need. Fact. There is a very real humanitarian crisis in Palestine, definitely in Gaza. I added the definitely Gaza. And we wanted to highlight a number of charities that are operating in the worst affected areas. These organizations are accepting donations, which are used to provide aid to those desperately in need. So please consider lending your support. Not really taking a side there. Maybe slightly in the representation of what went on. You'll notice again a bra ad. But this, okay, whatever. Okay, you're trying to raise money for people who are legitimately suffering, who can't control what's going on. Similarly, the Super Smash Brothers community is holding an online melee tournament to raise money for the Palestinians in predominantly Gaza who are suffering. They have no control over all this stuff. Absolutely. But GameSpot, whose managing editor made a video stating his clear political opinion as an individual, didn't go so far as Kotaku. Again, borderline genocidal treatment, bullshit condemnation, so on and so forth. This is off the rails. And now we get to the part where I say why I'm not okay. Like, who cares what Kotaku does? Well, let's face it. Kotaku did this because they thought they could get away with it. They thought these opinions were so normalized in gaming that they would get definitely traffic for it. I'm not going to provide a link on this video because I don't want to encourage this horseshit. But, people who have relatives on both sides of this whole thing, or friends, or, in my case, one of my regular viewers on Twitch lives in Israel, and he was saying he was in and out of Twitch chat last week because air raid sirens were going off and he had to go to the bomb shelter, right? Like, the lives of people on both sides are being disrupted. Yes, there is not an equivalency there Obviously, the defenses on the Israeli side are much stronger than on the Palestinian side. However, those of us who have more of a human connection, my husband and I don't just identify as Jewish, we actually keep kosher. And so when I start seeing stuff on Twitter that have maps of the entire, former Romanly occupied area of Palestine, aka the Levant, aka Judea, that's all Arab names, all like that's allowed on Twitter. Just, a certain prominent person in gaming, I'm surprised they didn't include this, said Israel is not a country last week. This should be condemned, and some people did. I give people who are fairly rabid in politics in other ways, I give people credit for condemning that one. But to see this and to see, that's bordering on hateful, right? That is someone's emotions getting so out over their skis that they don't realize they're saying, I'll come right in and say it, a bigoted view in public. There is probably no country in the world that has not had borders defined by conquest of some kind. The human history is bloody. That does not mean all conflicts are equal. I personally think that those of us who are not Indigenous in North America should shut the fuck up about other people's business until we deal with our own transgressions against the Indigenous populations. I'll call out Canada's, Indigenous clean drinking water problem right now. Like, until Canada solves that shit, who the fuck are we to be complaining about any other country? We have our own goddamn issues, right? But there is this whole thing of how welcoming is the left in video games to people who share the faith my husband and I do, have, my husband family are Holocaust survivors. And the fact that Israel offers protection against those sort of genocides ever happening again. That's the part that kind of gets left out. I'll go on the record as saying I don't like theocracies, period. I don't. I don't think theocracies are healthy for anybody living under theocratic rule. I do think having a pipeline to get people out of, say, Russia, when there were rumors of upcoming pogroms in the 90s, or Poland, or, I had friends in high school who got out of Russia through Israel, but there was no space to get them there, so they ended up in Italy, and then eventually they came to Canada, right? And they have an immigrant story the same way as, Syrian refugees or Libyan refugees, or we got a lot of refugees in the Toronto area, okay? And, if people lived in Israel, if they were coming of legal age in Israel, they served compulsory military service. Compulsory means compulsory, okay? Which means, yes, Gal Gadot was in the Israeli military. I, have a regular on my Twitch chat. He's Luxembourg, I believe, but he served compulsory military service because some countries require it. A lot of the Scandinavian countries as well require compulsory military service. Now, those countries are fortunate enough to be fairly peaceful. They don't have active wars, but compulsory means compulsory. And to see people being attacked for complicity with military service they had to do just because of where they had to be born, that's no different than, blaming the average Palestinian in Gaza for the actions of Hamas. Okay? Like, they have no control over what goes on. Israeli politics is really messed up. It's minority rule. Hamas is a terrorist organization, right? They don't listen to the people, right? This is not stuff that we should be getting into in video games, because let me show you the groin pull that ensues based on Kotaku's soapboxing on this. Like, really mask off, right, about what they really believe. This wasn't just, hey, let's help the Palestinian people. This was Israel bad. Ian Walker is entitled to that opinion. The staff of Kotaku is entitled to the opinion on their own time. Kotaku should be a place, like IGN realized, that Israeli Jews, some of whom are game devs, many of whom are gamers, should be able to come and feel like they're not being discriminated against, right? Because this is what happens. Okay, screed, shameless capitalism. The weekend games, Days Gone rides onto the PC. Like, if you're Bend Studios, right? If you're Bend, who got fucking bent over on the PlayStation, is trying to make more money on their game on the PC, do you think they want this advertised in an article about fucking Palestine? I wouldn't if I were them. They're trying to sell goddamn games where rednecks shoot zombies and have feels. Okay? They don't want to be pulled into this crap. Like, they don't. And they mentioned Mass Effect and Resident Evil in this article. You think Mass Effect and Resident Evil, you think the people who worked hard on those games want to be pulled into this crap? No, they don't. Nobody does, except for the most radical zealots on the left who thought this was a good idea. Up the fucking chain. At least IGN had some sense. At least GameSpot, even though they've obviously got an emotional connection to them, at least they had the good sense to keep it fairly neutral and focus on the humanitarian crisis, not the politics. Like, I don't know what curse got put on Days Gone, but holy shit, that game is really good, and it gets nothing but screwed. So if you're watching this, please, let your takeaway be not anything about politics, not anything about people killing each other in places of the world where even people who live in those places in the world can't do anything about, holy fuck, Israelis have been trying to vote out Netanyahu for 4 elections now. Like, holy shit, complicity what? Like, no, please. If you want to give to something humanitarian, I recommend the displaced Ethiopian people. But if you want to do something related to games, please get Days Gone on the PC. I may actually buy Days Gone on the PC and not play it. Maybe I'll gift a copy to somebody with PC. We'll talk about this on Twitch. Maybe I can gift a copy of Days Gone, because I got it free on PSN, and I am enjoying the fuck out of this game, and I feel like I should give them full price for the enjoyment I have gotten out of these games, because this is a fucking gaming YouTube channel. These are video games. This is what we should be talking about. People have every right. People should care about the world, right? I care about the world. Clearly, I know a lot about global events, or at least I am interested. I am no expert, right? I'm just doing a compare and contrast here. I'm not saying I'm an expert on any of the regions I covered in this video. But I need to get away from this shit by playing a lovable redneck, played amazingly by Sam Witwer. Witwer, he's a very difficult last name to say. But excellent, really cool, all the feels, good zombie, like, bike and gun. It's not even run and gun gameplay. This is what we should be talking about. We should not be sucked into a vortex of misery because Kotaku went off the fucking chain, and we have to call them on this shit. Because everybody, and that means everybody should feel welcome in gaming, regardless of where you live, regardless of what your politics are. You are judged by your actions. If you don't bring it up, I don't need to know you're an anti-vaxxer, right? I don't need to know you're an anti-Semite. Don't bring it up in front of me. we can play games. Right? Right. If you agree with this sentiment, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching. Again, apologize for the rant, but I am not okay.